Over to you, Milton.
All right, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can. I can hear you.
Okay, good. So, and you can see the slides?
Yes, I can
All
see
right.
the slide.
All right, so thank you. I have a kind of a broader discussion than Farzi, I think, in terms of engagement that people in NCSG need to, excuse me, have maybe a bigger picture of what's going on. And I think one of the main trends in internet governance now is this notion of digital sovereignty, or what some of us refer to as the fragmentation of the internet. So let's go back to basics here. Why did we create ICAN, and why do we need to participate in it? And I think people have started to forget why this institution exists. So the idea was that the domain name system, and indeed the internet, was global, that it was not territorial, it was not a collection of national networks. It was a transnational system focused on creating global compatibility for communications, for digital communications. And so we said, well, if that's the case, we need to have global policy making regarding the internet identifiers, the DNS, the IP addresses, and the protocol parameters. So we created ICAN as the organizational embodiment of this coordination and policy making process. And we didn't want the DNS to be fragmented into a bunch of national jurisdictions. And so we said, well, if that's the case, we really have to make this non-governmental. We don't think governments either acting on their own or through international organizations like the ITU or the treaties would be a good way to do this. And one of the reasons we did that was that we wanted the policymaking process to be open to the global internet community. We didn't want it to be restricted to official representatives of states and then have a bunch of national polities debating with themselves. So that's why ICAN was created. And of course, the non-commercial constituency and the non-commercial stakeholder group was created along with that process. Now, there is, let's put it bluntly, kind of a reactionary movement that is really gaining steam around the world, and that is going by the name of digital sovereignty. And you could talk about this very broadly across a number of issues, but since this is ICAN and the NCSG, I want to focus specifically on how this movement affects the DNS. And it used to be that all of the pro-sovereignty nations were considered to be authoritarian countries. And one of the most alarming things about the current trend is that Europe and the United States have also kind of moved in this direction. So let's talk about some of the European initiatives. I don't know if you've heard of the DNS for EU program, but this is a movement on the part of the European Commission to create, in effect, a name server system that is subsidized by and run by the European Commission or the European government. And the rationale for this is some kind of feeling of insecurity that they have, because so much of the DNS resolvers services that they are using are basically owned by companies outside of Europe, and typically, they would be referring to the large American-based platforms like Google and so on. And of course, internet service providers often provide DNS resolution. And it's really unclear what the European Union is trying to accomplish with this program, because again, in terms of security, it's not clear that you're more secure if the person running your DNS happens to be in your country. And unless you think the United States has designs upon invading Europe, I'm not sure that you are gaining anything in terms of security. But even if you did think, well, we need to defend ourselves against US domination, the issue is, how much are you willing to pay for that? And how much choice of Europeans are you willing to override? Are you going to allow European DNS users to choose their own DNS provider? Or are you going to force them into a European provided program? And if you're doing the latter, you're really going down the road of China and Russia. And if you're not, if you're giving people a choice, then it's not clear what you're doing other than subsidizing a service that's currently provided by the private sector. We also saw another European intervention into the DNS in their NIS2, which is a cybersecurity initiative, is trying to assert some kind of regulatory authority over root servers. And again, they're impinging upon a globalized system of cooperation and coordination among the root servers. And I think they might be pulling back on that because of the pushback that they're getting from the community, but it's something to be aware of. And it's certainly something that many countries have thought about, do we want our own national root server, as if that really made any difference in terms of where the packets go and how they're resolved. Now, you can't say that the United States is innocent of all of this. You might think that we are because we're allegedly the people who control the internet, but in fact, you see the same nationalistic tendencies in the US. So under the Trump administration, there was something called, there's a proceeding going on in the Department of Commerce about infrastructure as a service. That's the IaaS acronym there. And in effect, the US proposed that if you're using cloud services in the US, the government wants you to collect a lot of identification information about the customers. And again, that's kind of allegedly a cybersecurity thing. And that is not specifically applicable to the DNS. However, one of our good friends, and that is in air quotes, good friends, from the ICAN system, namely Inter-Isle Consulting, filed comments in this proceeding saying that you should classify domain name registrars and registries as infrastructure as a service, and you should force them to collect all this identification information, and then you should make them publish it. Does this sound familiar? Does it sound a little bit like WHOIS pre-GDPR? Well, of course, that's exactly what they're going for. They're trying to undo the privacy protections that we've instituted in WHOIS through these regulations. Now, we don't know yet how far that idea will get, but there are many forms of pushback in the US regarding the GDPR protections on WHOIS data. And again, this could lead to jurisdictional fragmentation of the DNS if the US passes laws regarding identification information for domain names that are not applicable in Europe or are not legal in Europe. We could have a fragmented system of regulations for DNS. Well, you probably heard something about the Russian attempt to make sure that domain names are also handled by territorially located Russian operators. And there's some, China never implemented this, but China's people did propose the idea that instead of a global DNS route, every country would have their own DNS route. And if you registered a global domain name, you'd have to go to every government in the world to get permission to have a global domain name. So this is a very disturbing tendency, and it really runs completely counter to what ICAN is all about. So I think as civil society, as non-commercial domain name users and internet users, we should have the following policy responses. Number one, we want global compatibility, and we want that for names, numbers, and protocols. We want everybody to be connected. Of course, we should allow people to institute their own policies regarding what they want to block or what they don't want to block. But that should be a decision at the organizational or individual level, not at the state level. We should be aware of and critical of sovereignty in cyberspace, the whole idea. We believe that human rights are universal. And am I going over time here?
Yes, so, but you could quickly round up.
Okay, I'm just about done. If you look at the rationale for sovereignty in cyberspace, it's really nothing more than a reason for governments to assert barriers over what they are, barriers into the internet. So that's it. That's my suggestion. Again, I think we need to be aware of this broader trend towards sovereignty in cyberspace, and we need to be pushing back against it.